Let's talk some chess. This game is from who else? Mikhail Tal. He's playing with white pieces against someone named Alexey Suetin. This game was played in 1969, and it's one of Tal's most brutal attacks. I mean, he's a great attacker, of course, but this is just a really, really crushing and demoralizing attack. So let's get into it. We have e4 from Tal, the Sicilian defense c5 from black, knight to f3, e6, and d4, so controlling a bit more of the center with these two pawns. C takes on d4 to get back some of that control, and knight takes on d4 to equalize material. We have a6, which is not the best move. You want to control the center and get your pieces out at the start of the game. And Tal right away gets a bishop to the center of the board with d3. Now, hopefully, we'll control some vital diagonals as the game goes on. We have knight to e7, knight to c3, and knight to c6 by black, connecting the two knights and getting the pieces out. And a nice little retreat here from Tal. So this knight on c6 came with an attack on the undefended knight on d4, and rather than exchange it, Tal decides that he wants to keep this knight and brings it to b3. So now we have three pieces neatly lined up on the third rank for Tal. We have knight to g6, so two moves so far with this knight, which is not usually what you want in the opening, and Tal just safely tucks his king away and castles kingside. We have b5 by black, now bishop to e3, four pieces now lined up on this third rank. The two bishops are awesome. They're controlling a lot of space. These two knights are ready to jump into the action, and this is, the king is safe, and this is a very comfortable position to play with the white pieces. We have d6 by black, f4 by Tal, getting some expansion, e7 by black, developing the bishop and potentially leaving room to castle here. But now Tal really doesn't give black much room to breathe, and he plays queen to h5. So getting the queen in the game, obviously you can't take the knight right now, but it looks pretty threatening if you're going to castle kingside. You have this f5 move, the queen is here, the two bishops are here, the rook can join in the game, so very threatening attack on the king side. And instead, black just plays bishop to f6, so again, two moves with the bishop is not great, but trying to control this diagonal, I guess, and add some support to the g7 pawn, but not really going to work. Tal brings his a rook to d1, lining up the rook with the queen, and then we have bishop takes knight on c3, which is reasonable, but now you've just played 1, 2, 3 moves with the same bishop just to remove a knight that's all the way on c3. It's probably not the best decision. So we have b takes on c3, and now queen to c7, getting the queen off the back rank. But Tal has a nice little rook lift here with rook to d2. Ideas of doubling up on the d file and the semi-open d file and adding some real pressure. So black plays knight c to e7. We have knight to d4 by Tal, getting this knight in a more threatening position to do some damage, and now bishop to c7 here. And this was kind of this is a better position for Tal, of course, but you can kind of salvage it with black by playing, there's one more move, f5, I'm sorry. Instead of bishop to d7, taking the pawn on c3 with the queen, you're attacking the rook and the knight, which are defended by the bishop, but if the bishop moves, of course, those pieces will be hanging. So it gets a little bit more, counterplay, and just a better sequence than what happened. Instead, black plays bishop to d7, and now Tal jumps into the attack with f5. So the move he's sort of been threatening ever since he played queen to h5. Now you're attacking the knight, you're attacking this pawn, and this is not going to be good for black, whose king is stuck here on e8. So we have e takes on f5, e takes back on f5, and now, believe it or not, the e file is open, where the king is sitting pretty. We have the knight is being attacked, of course, by the pawn, so the knight moves to e5, clogging up the e file for now. And now, sorry, I should have asked, but Tal wants to be aggressive and wants to attack, and he plays a very aggressive move here, which is knight to e6. This is an amazing square for the knight. It's attacking the queen. It's attacking the undefended g7 pawn, where it will land with check. And just an awesome place for the knight to be. You can't take the knight with the pawn, of course, because the pawn is pinned by the queen, so this queen to h5 move, very useful move. But you basically have no choice other than to take this knight, which is just completely dominating black's position, preventing castling from both sides, and so you have to take the knight. So black takes the knight on e5, and Tal takes back with the pawn. And now, this knight, it was great to have a knight here, but it's pretty good to have a pawn here, because the pawn is you know, helping to triple up on the f7 pawn. It's cutting off the d7 square and really cramping black's position. So here black plays g6, reasonably trying to kick the queen away from this h5 square and maybe, you know, get some attack this pawn as well, or sort of take the pawn now that the f7 pawn is not pinned. But here, sorry, I spoiled it. Hopefully you didn't see that. Here, see if you can find the kind of the finishing move here for Tal while I give you a moment. Sorry about that, heavy fingers. So a lot of moves work here. I'm sure, you know, I'm sure taking with the pawn, this looks pretty good. Well, maybe not as good, but a lot of moves work here. I'm sure retreating the queen to safety works just fine. But Tal says, I need to push and I need to sacrifice, so I'm going to take the knight on e5 with the queen. And you have to be careful. I mean, you know, an attack can go away very quickly when you just sacrifice the queen, but Tal figured, you know, he figured it was okay. In this position, you pretty much, you know, you have to. Oh, sorry, that's not what I want to show. In this position, you pretty much have to accept the queen sacrifice. You're down a knight, and the queen is also threatening the rook. So, you know, you could move the rook to safety, but then you're just getting all sorts of bad things. So you need to accept the queen sacrifice, which black does with d takes on e5. But look at that, all of a sudden now the d file has opened up, and this is going to be of great use to Tal. And now Tal finally plays e takes on f7 check. So this pawn, if we follow its march, it's been super, it came all the way from e4, captured on f5, captured on e6, and now captures finally on f7 with check. And now the game is basically over for black. And in this position, I think black actually did resign the game because it saw what was coming, and it's very, very not pretty. But we'll show it because it's such a fun attack. But the pawn is obviously checking the king, the king can't take the pawn because it's defended by the rook. And there are no real moves here that work basically at all for black. But let's see kind of the main ideas. So let's say the king tries to move to f8. Well, then you just get a beautiful finishing touch, bishop to h6, and this is checkmate. The pawn is taking these two squares away, the pawn is protected by the rook, and the bishop is checking the king. So you can't retreat the king to the king side with f8. But what if you bring the king to the queen side? And what if you play king to d7? This sets off like one of the most brutal and just like eviscerating attacks that I've seen on a chessboard. It's unfortunate that we didn't get to see it play out, but we can show it here and enjoy the idea that Tal had in mind. So basically this attack is going to make use of the two rooks controlling the d and the f file, and just going to force the king to dance around, sort of like a windmill. I recently talked about the windmill game between Torre and Lasker, kind of a similar idea here. So king moves to, is forced to move into d7 into the path of this rook. Unsurprisingly, we get a wonderful discovered check from the rook with bishop to f5, and this is a double check. So you cannot block. You can't block with the knight. You can't block with the queen. You need to move the king, and the king does not have many squares to move to. It has exactly one square, and it moves to c6. So now you get bishop to e4, and this is just a wonderful combination of bishops and rooks just covering the whole board. Once again, basically no options for the king. You need to block here with the knight, so you play knight to d4. But now, of course, bishop just takes on d5, checking the king. Bishop is protected by the rook, and here the king, again, really no options but to walk back into the path of the rook. So you get king to d7, and now this merciless bishop takes the rook on a8, and once again a discovered check from the rook on d2. So in the past two moves, this bishop has just removed a knight and a rook from the board, and it also comes with check, of course. So the king is in check. Again, not many options. Let's say you try to move back to the center of the board with e6. Once again, that really nasty bishop comes back into the game with bishop to d5 check. You're checking the king, and you're protecting this f7 pawn. Not that it needs protecting, because, need I remind you, there is a rook on f1 as well. So king, basically no options, back to the d file. Of course, if you move, this doesn't look very good either if you move to e7. So best move here per the engine is to move to d7, and now the bishop just retreats to b3, but of course another discovered check from the rook. So I lost count. There might have been 5 discovered checks from the rook, and just forcing the king into this awful vortex of pain. So now the king moves to b6, and now finally no bishop to d5. The bishop has sated its appetite and has gobbled up enough stuff. Instead, a wonderful rook lift to f6, checking the king. The king can't escape because of the bishop on e3, blocking these squares off, so the king must move to b7. And now the bishop, after a brief rest, comes back to d5, checks the king. King, has to retreat to the 8th rank, so it moves to b8. But now you get just the pawn promoting finally on f8 to a queen. So this pawn that has, I might have gotten the specific squares wrong, but the pawn has had a long journey, finally promotes to a queen. No squares for the king to move unless you want to just allow a new queen to come into the game. So rook takes, and now the king tries to escape to d7, but you just get rook to f7 check, and this of course will pick up the queen. So the king has to move, and now rook to c7 check, and the king takes the rook, but not after, or not before, I guess. You have a rook and 2 bishops left on the board. So just a really brutal attack. I mean, let's go through a little bit faster speed. Basically, so after the king moves to after the king moves to d7, black has a knight, 2 rooks, and a queen, and that's more material than white has. But after just discover check, blocks, check, king moves, discover check, and takes the rook, king moves, check, king moves, discover check, king moves, rook lift, king moves, check, king moves, promotion. Just after this just whirlwind, white has lost 1 rook and taken 2 rooks, a queen, and a knight. So just a completely brutal finishing attack, and you don't have to play this out to know how it ends. I mean, you bring the bishop. Let's might as well do it. We've seen the attack to this point. So bishop to c5, pawn push, rook just ready to come into the game on this open f file. Pawn keeps moving in case it gets promote. Rook comes to f7, king retreats, bishop to c6, pawn to b2. It looks like it's going to make it, but then you get bishop to b6. This is check. All these squares are taken away. King moves to c8, and finally the rook delivers checkmate. All of these squares are taken away by the bishops, and of course this is checkmate. So I didn't need to show you that last bit, but I did the line out, so I figured I might as well. But the important thing is after the king takes the rook, white is up so much material, and this is game over. So just an awesome attack. It never happened, of course, because black resigns in this position, but this is the brutal attack that Tal had in mind, just removing all of black's pieces from the board, and just a fun game and a fun set of sacrifices from one of the greatest players ever. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Drop a like, drop a subscribe, and we'll see you next time.